Has Game Freak been secretly brainwashing you to do nothing but play Pokemon? Let's find out! Hello Internet, welcome to Game Hypothesis. Trademark original character, do not steal. Okay, I'll be crystal clear with you here. This won't be so much of a game theory video, as it will be me talking about an actual real life thing that exists, with sort of a thin veneer of Pokemon wrapped around it. So imagine you're walking into this video expecting it to be a 10-minute thing about Pokemon. What I've done is more like I've killed Pokemon, sewn its skin onto a science report, and I'm trying to pass it off as saying, no really, it's a Pokemon video, I promise. So, with that no doubt wonderful image forcibly implanted into your mind, time for a little backstory. So, a few months ago, I was driving through Houston, Texas, and experienced the strangest thing. Out of nowhere, I felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to stop everything that I was doing and just play Pokemon. Now, I know it may be hard to believe, but Pokemon isn't normally on my mind every hour of every day, and I wasn't doing or thinking about anything that was remotely related to it. And this wasn't like a passing feeling of, oh, I should play Pokemon sometime soon, but more like a, holy shit, I need to drop everything I'm doing right now and play Pokemon. So it wasn't exactly like someone had come up to me and said, would you kindly play Pokemon, but it was getting pretty close. And this was really weird to me, and I wanted to figure out why that happened. So I closed my eyes and thought really hard about it. After that I heard some screeching and honking, and there might have been a wreck or two, but the point is, I eventually figured it out. For some reason, my brain had made a very, very strong mental connection between the smell of hot leather, humidity, and being in a car, and linked it all back to Pokemon. But why? Well, let's do some inceptioning here, and do a backstory within a backstory. Houston just so happens to be where my great-grandmother lives, and she is really out of touch with technology, and would love to drag me around with her everywhere she went when I was a kid, doing clothes shopping, running errands, and whatnot. So when I went to her house when I was little, I would always bring my Game Boy or DS or whatever I had, just so I wouldn't go insane in the meantime. And of course, the only games I would play back then were Pokemon games. Another interesting thing that I realized, though, is that my great-grandmother's car is a really, really old 1997 Toyota Camry. Seriously, it's got a little tape deck and everything, it's adorable. But it also has these really cheap leather seats. And the one last thing you need to know is that in Houston, summer days routinely push the temperature to around 100 degrees, and the city is constantly humid year-round. As in, the air is trying to suffocate you, constantly humid. Now, as I sat there in the 5-lane pileup that I had caused, I realized that was it. The humidity, the smell of the cheap leather cooking in the sun, and the sensation of driving around in a car. All those sensations combined had made my mind form a strong mental connection with some long-forgotten memory, that under these circumstances, I should be playing Pokemon. And it's not only that, I also get a similar, albeit much less intense, urge to play Pokemon when it's raining. And again, I can relate that back to my childhood. It's raining and I'm 7. What the hell else am I going to do all day but stay inside and play Pokemon? But now that I'm noticing this, I'm starting to think, well, maybe I'm just an insane person. But the voices in my head disagreed. So I went to look it up to see if there was any scientific evidence to back up this hypothesis of mine, and what I found was goddamn terrifying. Man, I am just blazing through these. Back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, a Russian psychologist named Ivan Pavlov conducted research on the psychological effects of something that he called classical conditioning, wherein he would try to pair a neural stimulus with an external stimulus, that is, relating a memory or emotion to something physical like a sound or a touch. In those tests, which these days have come to be known as the Pavlov's dog experiments, he would attach a device to collect and measure saliva from a dog's glands, initially wanting to see if how much saliva was released was affected by what kind of food it ate. However, he discovered that dogs started salivating as soon as he brought the food out, and decided to use that as a basis for a few experiments. Like, for example, Pavlov would ring a bell and then bring out some food for the dog. Of course, the dog didn't see any connection between the bell and the food at first, but eventually he figured out there was one, so he would start to salivate as soon as he heard the bell, even if Pavlov didn't bring out the food afterwards, which is a psychological effect we now know as classical conditioning. Today we see this as a pretty basic, fundamental thing to study, but his research back then was groundbreaking and would later go on to become the basis of the behavioralist school of psychology, which would then later be incorporated very successfully into the school of therapy, for example as a way to get rid of phobias. And that lines up pretty well with what I was experiencing. By being around all those stimuli, I had accidentally formed a bond between them and what I was doing at the time, that being playing Pokemon. And of course, to go back to that very much intentionally ridiculous hypothesis statement at the start of the video, no, of course Nintendo and Game Freak aren't doing this on purpose, but that doesn't mean that some people aren't. For example, the entire advertising industry is practically based around classical conditioning. Like, when you see this picture, what does it make you think of? Personally, I think food. Now, of course, you may similarly think disgusting food, but the point I'm trying to make here is that you do still think food. And why is that? I mean, there isn't anything edible in this picture. Well, it's because years of advertising have conditioned you to associate this image of the Golden Arches with food. But that's not all. Going back to my personal fringe case, you may have noticed that 2 of those 3 stimuli that trigger the Pokemon reaction in me are directly related to smell. And as I discovered, there is a reason for that. As it turns out, more so than any other sense, smell is the one that is most potent when it comes to bringing up memories and emotions. For example, I'm sure for most of us, a single whiff of chlorine is all it takes to make us want to go find some water to jump in. But why is this? Well, when your nose smells something, the information goes through your nerves up to your brain, where it's processed by the olfactory bulb, which starts inside of the nose and runs along the bottom of the brain. So that's what happens every time you smell roses or perfume or the like, but the really interesting part here is that the olfactory bulb has direct connections to 2 brain areas that are strongly associated with emotion and memory, the amygdala and the hippocampus. Also interesting is that visual, sound, and tactile touch information from nerves do not pass through these same brain areas, which is why smells, more than any other sense, are so successful at triggering emotions and memories. So there you have it. The sudden urge to play Pokemon under the right conditions is perfectly reasonable, and I'm not crazy at all. Well, not crazy because of that anyway. But hey, that's just a... No, actually that's a scientific fact. But hey, that's just a fact. A game fact. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the Super Amazing End Card Tournament. So today I'm asking you guys something that has long since been the bane of Pokemon professors and scholars everywhere. A perhaps unknowable mystery that lies deep at the heart of the Pokemon universe. Which Pokemon is cuter, Eevee or Zorua? It is very important to the world that we know the answer. I mean, you can probably guess who I'd pick, but I want to know what you guys think, so click the annotation on the screen right now to cast your vote. And guys, I had a shit ton of fun making a game theory video this week, and I really do hope that you all enjoyed it and were able to learn something. That was, kind of the point after all. And for those of you that are new, this was the 3rd of 4 Pokemon-themed videos I'm making as part of Poke-Month. The 2 previous ones were an analysis of whether or not Pokemon games need a hard mode, and riffing on a bunch of old, really weird Pokemon commercials. The final video, which is my next project at time of speaking but may already be out for you, is 10 things you didn't know about Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, so go check all that out. Also, I'm selling a Poke-Month exclusive t-shirt, which you should totally go buy down below. And finally, my wonderful Patreon patrons are what allow me to make videos full-time. So if you want to see more videos like this, go check that out at patreon.com/Psy, and see if anything I have to offer catches your eye. Speaking of which, I want to give a very special thank you to Isaiah Christo, Aaron Graff, Sawsbucky, Krista, Killy, Forgotten Paladin, and Ludwig for helping support my endeavors. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.